You grab my notes, and I promise to keep it brief. And my glasses. Suddenly got really quiet.
They feel so far away.
Yeah, don't hesitate to move up. The only thing I'm going to ask, and it's where we're recording here, if you not talk, if you're right next to the, and also be careful not to bump the chair, okay? But other than that, you can join Miss Summers at her table, because I'm sure she feels ostracized right now.
No.
You're good?
Yeah.
Okay. But anyways, I'm Jim Dunning, coach of the Broad Run Debate and Speech team, and I welcome you to the latest installment of the Broad Run Debate and Speech team's Masterclass series. Thank you for taking time out of your schedules today. Hey, our past presenters have included, well, a number of famous people, and actually if I can click properly, Pat Oswalt, stand-up comic and team alum. So he once sat in this, well actually I'm not sure if the library was here when he was here. So it might not have been, but he's been in the same classrooms that you've been, but we've been fortunate enough to have him come in and spend an afternoon coaching our speech team. We've also had in recent years Ilya Soman, who is a law professor at the Antonin Scalia School of Law, which is just up the street from us. And we also were fortunate during our COVID years to have Jay Brennan in, who is a Georgetown professor of actually a bunch of things, including, I think, economics, public policy, and but we had a really good discussion with him online a couple of years back. Actually, it might have been last year. I lose track because of the COVID years. But this is really cool because as a debate and speech team, we live in the world of what we call primary sources. And what's really cool about the people that we've had come in they are primary sources. I think in the world of philosophy, Jay Brennan from Georgetown is one of the most cited philosophers in the country. And we had him in to talk about voting, which was the issue for LD, or the topic for LD at that point. So we were actually able to consult with someone who was going to be cited in many of our rounds. And of course, the same thing applies to Ilya Soman and Pat Oswalt. People have done his pieces. So anyways, primary sources are really important. And I have to say that the person we have in today, I'd almost describe as the mother of primary sources, just because of the wide-ranging books that he has published. His interests in his research are wide-ranging. We have books from him on, well, if we talk about debate, childcare. He has a book that, actually I've got some pictures here, that argue that you should have lots of children. So we could cite his books, or the statements that he's made in his books about when we've debated whether we should have universal childcare or not. Voting. One of my favorite books of his is The Myth of the Rational Voter. We also have Migration, a great graphic novel format called Open Borders, The Science and Ethics of Immigration. I think the most recent book is, How Evil Are Politicians is certainly a really good one too, and I think the title says it all. But one of the most recent books he has is Don't Be a Feminist, which I think is an essay written to his daughter, which the title is very intriguing and well worth exploring beyond the cover. But what we're here to talk about today is the case against education and why the education system is a waste of time and money. And so we have Bryan Caplan in, who is an economics professor at George Mason University, so just over in Fairfax County. And I know many of you are probably considering going there. So this is a New York Times bestseller, and has actually raised up quite a few hackles in the education world, but also some really important discussion about what we do, because it not only addresses higher education, but K through 12 education. So considering that we're in a public high school, I am worried that this book would burst into flames, and I'm actually hoping that Bryan doesn't burst into flames, but it hasn't happened yet?
No, not yet. So
Okay,
far, so good.
good. So, but the purpose of today, well, we do want you to actually challenge not only Bryan's observations about supporting public education with tax dollars, but also challenge yourself, because I think almost everyone here is probably on a higher education track. You're planning on college. And so we're not here to change your mind necessarily, but to make you more self-aware about the choices you're making. So we're hoping that the discussion today will foster that self-awareness and questioning not only again of Bryan's positions, but also your own positions on what you do here and what you do after you escape here, or graduate from here. So our format today is discussion. It's not presentation. I'm going to have Sarisha moderate. She'll toss out some questions, but please jump in and with your own questions. So we encourage you to do that politely. We know that all of you have actually already submitted questions, which we're not going to do anything with. We wanted you to think about why you're here. So don't hesitate to bring up those questions today. So let's get started. Thank you, Professor Caplan, for joining us. Turning this over to Team Captain Sarisha to lead us and moderate the discussion. Our team motto is Sapere Aude, which means dare to ask, so please ask. Okay? Anyways, take it away.
Well, thanks for that introduction, and thank you, Dr. Caplan, for
Thank you
being
very much. Hello, debate and speech team. It is fantastic to be here.
Alright. So, almost a decade ago, I see that you've written a little blog piece titled What Every High School Junior Should Know About Going to College. And so in this room, I would say we mostly have sophomores through seniors. I'm sitting here, a couple of freshmen in the back. So I'm just going to kind of ask you some questions about the statements that you made in that article and kind of delve if you still agree with it,
Right, sounds
considering
good.
our current education plan. So in that article, something you said was, college is a good deal for good students, a mediocre deal for mediocre students, and a poor deal for poor students. What specifically do you mean by that, and do you still agree with that statement?
Yes, I do agree with that. What does it mean to be a good, mediocre, or poor student? Usual measures. Are you getting good grades? Are you doing well in your classes? Are you getting good test scores? Why do I say this? Well, here's the whole problem with college. Almost all the payoff comes from graduation. Right, so you're aware of this, right? If you do 3.9 years of college, what does that actually do for your career? Almost nothing. Right now, what that means is that you really want to know, am I the kind of person that is likely to actually successfully finish? You might say, well, doesn't almost everybody? And the answer is no. Anyone have any idea? So what would be the 4-year graduation rate for full-time college students on average in America? Any idea? So the odds that you finish your 4-year degree in 4 years, what do you think that is?
70%?
Lower.
50?
Lower.
30?
Yeah, 35% of full-time, not talking part-time students. Only 35% of full-time 4-year college students actually finish the degree in 4 years. Why don't they? Well, a lot of people just give up. They get bad grades, or they get frustrated, or they get bored, or they wander off. Another reason is a lot of people just mess up their requirements. They take the wrong classes, and then they think they're ready to graduate, and then it's like, oh wait, you actually need a foreign language. Whoops, that's going to take another year. Another thing, people change majors. If you do 5-year graduation rate, then that goes up to 55%. So a slim majority manages to finish after 5 years for what is allegedly a 4-year degree. Now, why this matters is because while the overall percentage is a lot lower than most people think, it's highly predictable. People who are at the top of their class in high school would have a vastly higher 4-year graduation rate. They might even be able to finish in 3. Anyone here doing a lot of AP classes? Yeah, so it is possible that you could finish in 3 years, which is very rare, but it can be done by a motivated student. So basically, if you've got like an 80 or 90% graduation rate, or if we on-time graduation rate, that means that the odds that you are actually going to get that big payday over the finish line are much higher. If you're someone that's getting B's in high school, on the other hand, then you're probably down at about the average. And if you're not even doing that, then you are well below average, and your odds of finishing are just very slim. On top of that, of course, one thing that is very important for knowing what kind of a job you're going to get out of college is your major. You are probably have some idea. There are some high-earning majors. Can anyone tell me some high-earning majors? Majors where if you finish it, you will make a lot of money?
Engineering.
Yeah, engineering, yes. And electrical engineering, number one. Mechanical engineering, a little lower. What's another one that I bet most of you were thinking of? What's that? Yeah, CS, finance. And actually one that many of you probably are not thinking about, but which is actually a fantastic deal is economics, of which I'm a professor. Not just my opinion, this is the data. I always tell my students economics is the highest paid of all the easy majors. So it pays a bit less than engineering or CS, but for like 1/5 of the work. So that is something to keep in mind. If you've ever thought about doing econ, it is a great deal for people that are into that kind of thing. But anyway, again, people who are very good students tend to go into those harder majors, which are then higher paying. People that are weaker students in high school, if they do manage to finish, usually they're going to be doing an easier major like communications or psychology. There are jobs in those areas, but they just pay a lot less, and so you get a lot less out of it.
Well, I guess my next question is, so we're framing payoff as graduation, right? So how do you take into consideration things like the college experience, things
Right.
being like the alumni networks that top colleges offer, internship programs? How do you take those things that are not necessarily the payoff of finishing college, but going through it?
Right. I'd say almost all of those things would have almost no payoff unless you finish. What good is it to make a bunch of friends in CS if you drop out? Your friends are going to say, okay, let's go and hire my friend to drop out. This is possible, but it's just not very likely. Where I thought you were going with this question was, is it all just about the economic payoff of college? Is that the only reason to go? And the answer is no, that's not the only reason to go, but if college had no economic payoff, probably almost no one would go. It's a pile of money just to be in a country club. Right? And it's not even that fun of a country club. A lot of the time you're bored in class and just doing stuff you don't want to do. So now this is not just my opinion. There have been surveys of students asking them, why are you in college? And guess what? Financial payoff, career payoff are overwhelmingly the top answers. And this despite the fact that that answer doesn't sound very good, right? If you ask someone, gee, why are you in debate club? What is probably the most important real answer? You're doing it for your college application. But that isn't an answer that sounds good, right? If you are in an interview or something and someone says, so why did you do debate? You want to say, oh, I'm just there, I don't really even like debate, I'm just there to go and get something on my resume. No, what are you going to tell them?
Doing talking.
Oh yeah, so I just love the exploration of ideas and talking and discussion. Yeah, so the fact that people will admit that they're mainly in college to make money is very strong evidence that that's almost the only reason people are there. I mean, the only other one that's plausible is people are doing it because other people are doing it, just out of sheer conformity, embarrassment of not doing what the normal thing is. But again, if the payoff went down a lot, if there were no economic payoff, that would probably be just a death spiral of conformity because a lot of people will say I don't want to do it unless it pays. And then people say, well, gee, now it isn't even that weird to not do it, so maybe I won't do it. And I don't know. Now hardly anyone's doing it. So there are other things going on in college, of course. Main thing to keep in mind is that a lot of the things that people like about college you could also like about your first job, and you probably will like about your first job after college, like getting to go and meet a lot of fun people. Guess what? You can do that on jobs too. So keep that in mind.
Well, next I would ask is it valid to measure poor, mediocre, great students just by grades, right? So in high achieving spaces, obviously cheating is very easy to do, just on a practical scale. I'm not sure if that level of cheating or just ability to get good grades in easy courses is as easy in college. So would you say that—
Probably easier, actually.
Really? But I would ask, is it fair for someone like first generation college student or a low income student who might have higher home responsibilities to be marked as a poor student, and thus should they not pursue higher education?
Right, so how many people here are taking any kind of statistics class? Is it offered here? You're doing AP Stats? All right. So when I make these claims, I'm not just expressing an opinion. I'm saying if we go to the numbers, what do the numbers tell us? Now, what the numbers do tell us is that your performance in high school is an excellent predictor of your performance in college. It's an excellent predictor of whether you're going to be able to hack it in a hard major, generally high-paying majors. Excellent predictor of whether you're going to actually finish. If you say that it's just not fair, that people aren't doing well in high school, and there's a lot of reasons, well, guess what? The unfairness persists throughout life. When someone comes to me and asks for advice, I try to find out what their actual situation in life is and then assist them given their situation. So when someone says, well, gee, let's see, what's some of like the most horrible problems I've had students who have just had like very severe health problems where they can barely make it to class, and they say, well, do you think that I should still stick it out given my severe health problems? And I'll say, well, what's your prognosis? Right? And I say, no, it's really poor. Well, then maybe you should be doing something else. So I just try to be honest with people. You go and say, well, in a fair universe, no one will get sick. Yeah, but that's not what you're asking me. You're asking me for personal advice about how to run your life. And so I'm just going to be honest and tell you about it. You may have discovered that life is not fair. Are you familiar with this fact? Does it seem super fair to you so far? A lot of things going on in school is that people make a lot of effort to make school more fair than the rest of real life. And if you say, wow, it gets worse than this, yeah, it does get worse than this, of course. So you can either sit around and complain about how unfair life is, and I do that too. But in terms of, but what practically can I do? Then you just want to know what predicts what is likely to actually work for me, regardless of the fairness of the system.
So in the context of, let's say upward mobility, would you say that it wouldn't be more beneficial for someone like a low-income student to then go off and get a Pell Grant, which would pay for their college, and try to pursue STEM without any prior experience, even if they're characterized by poor students? Is there any hope of building a work ethic in college? Because on average, first-generation students have that capability with a college degree to move up in a financial bracket.
Right, there's always hope. It's just a question of whether it is a reasonable hope or just a Hail Mary pass. Right, so here's one that's very strong. If you did poorly in high school math, your odds of ever getting a STEM degree are near zero. So I think the state of California did a statewide math test. If I remember correctly, I think 0 people in the entire state for multiple years ever actually successfully got a bachelor's degree in STEM. Or you say, well, but I could be the first. All right, but what is statistically the likely thing to happen? So I would say that, as particularly if you just did poorly in high school math, then the odds that you're going to ever successfully do a STEM degree are just so low. It would be irresponsible for someone to advise you to try it anyway. It would be like telling someone who has no experience in mountain climbing to try climbing Mount Everest. It's like, well, I could be the first. Yeah, but more likely you'll just die. So don't. I know there's a lot of propaganda in school about how anyone can do anything if they put their mind to it. You've heard this speech before? Right? There's not a lot of propaganda about discover your own limitations and then know what's realistic for you and then quit if you're pursuing a bad route. But that is actually often excellent advice. Right? Anyone here planning on being a professional athlete? Right. Well, probably because you have a realistic idea. Probably because you have a realistic idea. Well, aren't there any polymaths who do debate and football and volleyball and chess? Anyway, so there's so many kids who think they're going to be professional athletes, and guess what? Share of them are wrong. It's like 99%. Right. So now, if there's a kid who's close, maybe you say try harder. But there's a kid who's not even the best kid at his high school, and he thinks he's going to be a world champion. This is where the kind thing is to say, look, it's just not realistic. It's hopeless, really. It's so astronomically unlikely. You need to find something else that you like and are good at, because it's not going to be a career for you.
I'm going to turn it to the audience really quick. Is there anything that Professor Caplan said where you have a sort of counter argument, or you'd like to substantiate anything that he said so far? Because I do know that obviously this is very contrasting to anything we've ever heard, ever. And so...
Doesn't anyone tell you the truth in private?
In regards to higher responsibility, maybe an experience of being a low-income student, do you guys have anything? And you guys can just say it.
Ask me anything. You cannot hurt my feelings.
So, what do you suggest, instead of higher education then?
So again, in terms of someone who's doing very poorly in school, and then, step one would be, so is there anything that people do for pay that you like and are good at? That would be the first question. Right? If the answer is no, then it's like, all right, that's going to be harder. Honestly, if there's someone where their odds of succeeding in college are very low, I would just say, and they have no idea what else to do with their lives, I would say just get a job. Get a job and see what happens there. Probably you won't like that first job, then find another job. I'd also say, think about any personal connections you have. Do you have any relatives in any jobs that you think might be interesting for you, where they could get you an internship, where you could go and be an apprentice? Some of the main things that get overlooked are jobs and crafts. So, electrician, plumbing, construction. These are well-paid jobs that you do not, even now, you don't need any college for. A lot of people just say that's beneath me, I would never consider doing it. And it's like, well, if you don't even like school, then that is a possible good route for you. There's, of course, plenty of others, but, honestly, when I'm giving someone advice, I try to talk to them and say, well, so what is it that you like and are good at? And if they say school, it's like, okay, well, that's a standard path, but if it's not school, then it's a different story, and you really do need to look around more for other possibilities.
I would say that another thing that was in the article was kind of this idea of don't go to college if you don't know exactly what career to pursue, or like the rise of college graduates feeling like they don't know what to do in college, going in as an undecided major. Considering that most colleges' first year curriculum is kind of an exploratory period of kind of exploring new classes or even being classified, most of their classes, an undecided major, is this statement still valid? And isn't the first year of college kind of the place for people to figure out, go to the classes, meet professors on what they like to do?
So I don't actually remember putting it that way. That doesn't sound like me. For graduate school, that is where I always ask people, what job do you want to get? And then I tell them whether the graduate degree is the correct credential for that job. For undergraduate, you're right. It's true that a lot of people don't know what they want to do, but they are, again, as long as you were a good student in high school, being confused about what you want to do does not mean that it's not going to work out for you. Basically, there's just a lot of jobs where you can just get a college degree in something or other, and then you can get the job. That's not true for STEM or something like that. But there are if you just look at people who have jobs in business, a lot of those people don't have a degree in business. Of course, often they have degrees in STEM. That's what you'll see in finance, for example. So, anyone here want to work at Wall Street or finance? That's statistically really unusual. All right, I'm just going to predict a bunch of you will, right? But anyway, it's very common for Wall Street firms just to hire people with degrees in physics or math on the theory that if you can do well in those subjects, we think you can learn how to learn about stocks and bonds. But what I'd say is, the crucial thing is, did you do well in high school? In that case, you can safely show up and say, I don't really know what I want to do yet. Again, important to remember that most college majors actually are so remotely related to any job that you aren't really preparing for a job. What you're really doing is what I call signaling, which is actually the whole point of the book. It's a pretty simple idea. It just says that a lot of the reason why education pays isn't that you're going to use what you learned in school. It's that you get a stamp on your forehead. You're grade A worker, grade B worker, grade C worker, and so on. So yeah, if you go and get a degree in psychology, the odds that you'll ever actually work as a psychologist are really low because there's so few jobs for them, and basically you need to get a graduate degree to really get one of those jobs. But there's a lot of businesses that want people with college degrees in something or other, and a psych major can get that, or communications major or history major. These are going to be paying on average less than if you're doing STEM or economics. But yeah, again, if there's someone who's a good student and they didn't know what they want to do, then I would say, yeah, go and try the usual path. Just go there and try to take a bunch of different things. Although, I would also encourage them to go and look at some real numbers on what kinds of jobs you're likely to get with different degrees and how much money you're likely to make. But also, understand what are the math requirements, which, honestly, math requirements are the main barrier for most people in choosing a major because
are interested in pursuing, let's say, psychology with the intended career of being a psychologist, hearing kind of that thing of, such transferability between major and career, is there any thoughts that are going through your mind in terms of looking towards the future? So like personally for me, I can say that like I'm currently very interested in applied mathematics and kind of seeing how I can apply that to data science. And you know, hearing with what Professor Kaplan just said, that does make me question, you know, where I'll actually end up if there's actually, you know, a place in data science for me, or you know.
Yeah, well, that's one of the most vocational majors you could possibly do. So you get a data science degree, you become a data scientist, and that there's the market's hot. So yeah.
Yeah.
But if you want to do history, it's a different matter.
Do you know where, you know, more so humanities focused majors kind of end up in terms of jobs?
Yeah, like humanities majors end up all over the place. Of course, the most straightforward thing is to go and become a teacher and teach whatever you majored in. So you get a degree in history and become a history teacher. That is a totally viable option. But in terms of other degrees, basically there's just a long list of jobs where you need a college degree in something or other. It doesn't really matter what. And if you have a college degree in something that isn't STEM, then those are the jobs that you're likely to get.
Is signaling a bad thing? Because the book talks about it a lot, right?
Yeah.
In like a bad way. So is it really such a bad thing as you're saying?
Well, here's the main issue with signaling. So again, like I said, getting stamps in your forehead. Is it a bad thing that we have some information about who is better and worse at different activities? By itself, that's great. Right? You want to know who actually knows how to go and cut open a person's skull and remove a part of their brain. You don't want to just say, let's find out as we go. All right, that would be a bad idea. The real issue, though, with signaling is that there's what people sometimes call a rat race, or I just like the phrase of credential inflation. The problem with signaling is that if the main thing that you're doing in school is just getting stamps in your forehead, well, what happens if everybody gets an extra stamp? It doesn't mean everyone can get a really good job. It means that you need to get even more stamps in order to have your job application not thrown in the garbage. In the book, I go over a lot of the evidence on this. What we can see is that there are many jobs that now a college degree is required, that in the time of your parents or grandparents or great-grandparents, you could have done it right out of high school or even without the college degree. Right, so the idea of signaling is this. We usually think about education as being job training, but to a large degree, it is more like a passport to the real training that happens on the job. That's how it's possible that people became business managers after being high school dropouts 70 years ago, is because what you really need to do to run a business, it isn't mostly taught in school, it's something that you learn by doing. Right? And again, the problem with signaling is just that the more that we push signaling, the more education people need in order to do just as well as their parents or grandparents would have done with fewer credentials. So yeah, so while at any point in time it does serve a useful function, it's something where if you really push it, then we can get into this dysfunctional system that we live in right now, where you've got to get a whole bunch of degrees just to get a job where really you could start now, honestly. Let me just give you an idea of other countries. So in the UK, first of all, what do you need to do to be a doctor in the US? Anyone here want to be a doctor? All right. So what do you have to do?
You have to get a degree from college. Then
Yes, yeah. First you got to finish high school, then you got to get a degree from college, then
you have to go to med school for 4 years.
yeah,
And
then
then go to residency.
yeah,
And then
and
if you want
finally.
to specialize, you can fellow.
yep. All right. So guess what? If you were in the UK, you get to go to med school right out of high school. Is anyone worried that if you went to a British doctor, that because they didn't study Shakespeare or do their gen ed in college, that they would not be able to operate on you properly? No. It's just this is just one example of credential inflation in the U.S. We've just piled on 4 extra years of your life. And think about it. It already takes long enough to become a doctor, and then you have to go and do 4 more years on top of that, fulfilling general ed requirements and everything else. It's a pretty crazy system. And the same goes for even professors, actually. Professors used to be able to become professors with a master's degree. All right, now you're just a lowly graduate student earning minimum wage or something like that while you're teaching in grad school. So that is really the heart of the problem, is the credential inflation, just adding on more and more years of school and just doing it and because other people are doing it. See, and the problem still seems to be getting worse. So you guys have heard of a postdoc. Heard of a postdoc? It's like after you get a PhD, but before you get a real job, you go and spend another couple years in this low-paid limbo state. And now there's actually something called a pre-doc. This is where in between undergraduate and graduate school, you spend a couple years making low money, getting ready just to apply to be in a doctoral program. So like the amount of years that students have to spend just to start real life has gotten up to a crazy high level. And I say that it is a problem of excessive accessibility of education.
So how do we change that?
Yeah, great question. This is actually one of the easiest things to do. So why do we have so much credential inflation? It's because college and other forms of education have gotten to be so accessible that if you want the share that try is really hard, or is really high rather. So something like 70% of high school grads in America start college. All right, now a lot of that is community college, so they're sort of inflating the numbers by including that, which has even lower graduation rates than 4-year. But again, the issue is that when you make education really accessible to people, then it also means that the share of the population that gets it's really high, and it means a lot less. So again, I can understand people being terrified by this idea and saying, wait, I would have to pay for my own college?